What's up, everyone? It's Dakota, and welcome back to another Magic the Gathering video. And today, I'm getting ready for a team tournament with my co-host on the Casual Spikes podcast, Randy, and we're going to be going to Caldwell, Ohio, with another friend of ours to play in the Apex Gaming team event, which is going to be a lot of fun. I enjoy playing in team events. I just enjoy going to tournaments in general, just because of the atmosphere, the people you meet, the games that you play. It's just exciting. I get a lot of anxiety going to tournaments and everything like that, but it's like a good anxiety, that competitive drive and that edge of just like, I'm going to play the absolute best that I possibly can play to kind of convert the few tournaments I get to go to into a top 8 and potentially into a win. Now, of course, not always successful in that endeavor. Luck does play a little bit into it, but with this video, the idea is going to be that we're going to try to limit the outside factors, the thing that we can actually control, thoroughly prepare for a tournament, whether it's an RCQ all the way up to, regional championship, pro tour, what have you. Obviously, for me, I have not had the pleasure of getting to prepare for like a pro tour or like even like a regional championship. I've gotten to go to tournaments and prepare to tournaments of that size, but not really necessarily like the magnitude, unless you consider like a Grand Prix kind of like that level of like a regional championship. But, times have changed. The tournament preparation is still kind of the same in trying to get in the right mental headspace and get into kind of the right mood and the right feeling to give yourself the best possible opportunity mentally, physically, and emotionally to perform your very best and get the result that you're hoping to get out of the tournament. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead. I'm going to try to break it down into a few different sections. We're going to go kind of like pre-tournament, during the tournament, and then post-tournament, which I think does a lot for, helping you grow just outside of that one event and potentially get into, maybe going to another event, soon after, just kind of taking the information that you learn, going home, taking it, so on and so forth. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the video. So we're going pre-tournament here. This is going to be all the preparation that you should be doing or stuff that you should be thinking about beforehand, before, the day before the tournament. And one of the best ways that you can do that is by subscribing to my YouTube channel over here at Crawdaddy23, where I post a lot of modern Pioneer content as well as longer form content to kind of break up some of the, learning and stuff that you might be doing, or, the information gathering that you might be doing, which you should absolutely be doing before tournaments we'll get to in a minute. But please, if you are not already subscribed to the channel and you want to subscribe, please consider doing so. Bring notification bells so you know when videos get posted, like this, like the podcast, like my other modern and Pioneer focused content. And of course, leaving a like on the video as well. Supports the channel. The algorithm likes the interaction and stuff. And I would love to interact with the people as much as I can on my videos and stuff. So if you would please leave a like on the video, join the Discord server, all that fun stuff. So now with that shameless promo out of the way, the preparation. I'm pretty much a set in stone person. My philosophy with the decks that I play in tournaments are basically like picking a deck that I would enjoy playing, but also attacks the metagame in a way that I want to attack the metagame. That doesn't mean you have to I enjoy playing this like tier 3, tier 4 deck, even though you want to win, saying that you should play that tier 3, tier 4 deck and then just, register it anyway and hope that the luck kind of breaks your way. I think that at near the top of the metagame, there's something there for everybody. Whether you're a person that just wants to play like the most played deck or the best deck, what have you, that's fine. If you want to kind of pick some like weird metagame picks, maybe you want to play like the mid-range or control decks in the case of like Pioneer, that's totally fine. But definitely having your deck list, or at least the deck that you want, figured out so you have a base of where you're going to work on. And a lot of that, if you're like a beginner, is trying to make sure that you understand the ins and outs of your deck, understand what it's trying to do. If you're playing like a mid-range strategy, it's like trying to figure out exactly what 7 and 6 card hands are keepable, like what matchups, definitely the work for the control and mid-range decks like Rakdos mid-range or Azorius control and Pioneer are going to be very hard to play and get as much information as you can, because I think the more matches you play with those decks, you actually end up getting a lot better. I mean, that's really the case for any deck that you decide to pick up and play. Is just getting more reps is going to help you in the long run to encounter some situations you might not have encountered before, and then seeing how you react just on a basic level of like not really understanding what's going on, or like realizing that the situation is new, and then thinking of a few decisions that you can making one of them, that you think is the best in that moment, and then kind of learning from that situation is going to go miles ahead, when you get into an actual tournament and you encounter those situations. The best way is to kind of play as much as you can. If you're just a single person, it's going to be on Moto, having like a Mana Traders account, or, if you already have kind of a collection on Moto, trying to get into something like the deck that you are playing, which I guess you might already have something like that. But getting a rental service, just being able to, rent the 75 cards that you're thinking about playing, and then maybe as you play like 5 or 10 matches, and you're like, you know what, X card isn't really cutting it. I would rather have something else. You can kind of go to the drawing board, look at other decks that are in your archetype and things like that, and find different cards that maybe you can replace and just kind of retool and give your deck kind of that boost that you think it needs to perform well at a tournament. I will say, obviously, playing online is a lot different than playing in paper, just not only mechanically, just from how you're going to be doing things, rather than clicking a mouse, I guess, shuffling cards with your hands. But you're going to essentially be kind of in this place where maybe you see a lot of like one deck and you're not seeing a lot of another. I think when you get to like the really big tournaments, your small little changes are going to more matter on like a macro scale than it is a micro scale, where like usually going to like something like an RCQ, I've seen a lot of like Midwest tournaments have like 20, 30, 40 people RCQs. Depending on if you frequent that store, you could probably get a good idea on the metagame and kind of tool your deck very specifically for the 75 cards that way. But if you're going to like some of the bigger tournaments, like a regional championship, maybe like a convention, for Star City Games, Nerd Rage Gaming event, you probably want to lean more towards a more all-around kind of deck list with maybe a few silver bullets in like the main deck, just to kind of give yourself like a little bit of game and matchups that you think you might struggle against while you're there. The preparation also beforehand, you definitely want to make sure you know your deck. You want to know the format as well. You want to get a good understanding of what everyone else is playing and how they're going to interact with you. And I think a lot of that helps just by looking at deck list, kind of getting the basic idea of what they're trying to do, maybe mentally play out a few games, not physically, but like mentally play out a few games and put yourself in situations where you're playing your deck and you're going up against your opponent and thinking like, okay, like at what turn could they have something that could, if you're playing a combo deck, that could disrupt my combo. If you're playing an aggro deck, try to knock you off curve. If they playing like Rakdos mid-range, like if they thought seize you, what card are they going to take? Which I think does a lot in helping you then evaluate further, in that little sector there, to evaluate like what your opponent has, and then if you can play around it accordingly, or if you just kind of have to like bite the bullet and like, well, my draw lines up pretty well with theirs, and they're just probably going to get the better of me, so then I have to try to navigate a situation to make it less bad for me and, less good for them, I suppose. So those are some important things. Those are if you do nothing else, and you just get like some good sleep, keep some good vibes and everything like that. If you just kind of study the format, you understand what your deck is doing, and at least the smaller tournaments, you could probably get by and get a top 8, by doing like the bare minimum of those things, which is like looking probably at the top decks, like understanding the general game plan, and then of course like playing, a handful of matches, maybe 10 matches with the deck that you're playing. If you want to take it to kind of the extreme, I mean, it would just go down to trying to actually physically learn the decks and be able to play them competently. If you have like a group of friends, like they all play a different style deck, or, you have some pretty good technical players as well, you can kind of play these playtest games where like you kind of slow things down, you work out like the best play for like the situation, for the information that they're given, and kind of like work from there. That's kind of, I think at least a fun way of testing is just having a group of friends and doing it. But definitely if you're just kind of confined to being a one person show, playing on Moto is more than okay. You can just keep jamming games all day. You can play for free. Things like that. Of course, after you either rent your deck or pay for it and everything like that. So those are definitely some absolute must for like pregame, like tournament stuff. The only other things, just for, basic health reasons, like getting a good night's sleep, make sure you're drinking plenty of water, up to the tournament and everything, make sure you're hydrated, make sure you're feeling good, whatever way that you need to kind of get in the right mental mindset to perform and, do as much as you can for playtesting, do as much as you can for kind of studying and things like that are going to go a long way, in like the prep and hopefully take away some of the nervousness you might be feeling going into some of those bigger events, where there's a ton of people, it's loud, what have you, at least in some way you'll be able to kind of like focus on the game and kind of be able to rest on like your training and your preparation, which is like a lot of like what happens in sports. You gonna get in those high pressure moments. Maybe you encounter a moment you've never seen before, and I think it's easy to freak out. And with at least prepping beforehand and even a little bit the day of, you are able to kind of just relax and, focus on the situation and have an appropriate response to something that you might not recognize, rather than just kind of going ooga booga and just going absolutely crazy. So, that is some of my tips and tricks for, pre-gaming. Let's go ahead and talk about the day of the tournament. So I lied. It's not time to go to the next one because I just remembered, one of the easiest things to kind of take away some of like the mental tax that you can do kind of before the tournament. And that is creating kind of a sideboard guide that fits into your deck box. I know that if you have like on a piece of paper, you're able to like fold it up, nothing crazy. You don't need like 3 or 4 sheets, just matchups maybe you're kind of unsure about that, if you see like a guide from somebody on, Patreon, on like Twitter, things like that have been playing the deck that you're playing and, plays either you're kind of like taking their list and it's easy to kind of go one for one. Maybe if you have some different cards, things like that, you can kind of tune your sideboarding to kind of like that same kind of thinking, at least. Definitely helps out, obviously, if you just play the exact list, but if you kind of have some cards and things like that you want to play that, they're not, then, again, you can kind of take liberties with a sideboard guide, and it makes things a lot easier too, because you're not thinking like, oh, do I take this out? Should I? You can just look at your list like, okay, hey, this is what I got. Like, this is what I'm going to do. And then you can just make changes from there. You can focus on like, what, I think that this is fine, but I'm actually going to play this card instead of that card, or I'm actually going to take out an additional one of these and play another one of these, while you're in the event. And I think it's a lot easier to kind of make changes that way than to think about, okay, well, like, what do I cut? What do I bring in? And then on top of that, like, what do I want this or I want that? You kind of just skip that first step altogether, and you kind of get to step 2 where you just kind of like reconfigure and like, okay, do I bother doing this? Do I want to do this? Okay, then let's go. And that is something that I forgot, which, makes life super easy, to be honest, when playing it. I've only played where I've had like a sideboard guide a few times, and it has been so helpful in just, getting to spend the least amount of time sideboarding and then going into the game and be like, okay, I can kind of evaluate my position from there, based on what happened in the previous game, without having to think about, what cards I'm bringing in, and I can just worry about what I'm going to take out additionally or bring in additionally, or just not even make any changes at all, just shuffle up and play. So that is officially the end of the pre-tournament stuff. Let's go ahead and get into the post-turn, or the in-tournament, the day of stuff that I think is also obviously very important, because it's all the stuff that you're going to want to do, to make sure that you're the most successful as the day kind of progresses. So obviously the day of the tournament, super important. It's kind of all the things that we've prepped for leading up to it, and this is kind of where we're going to kind of show what we're made of. So I think the day of, kind of like the best thing to do, first and foremost, get a good breakfast in, get a good night's sleep, and make sure you drink plenty of water during the event. Just at a base, like before, like the day even starts, before you even talk about casting a spell, playing your first land, what have you. I think it's important that you kind of, again, get yourself physically and mentally ready. Throw on some music that, just kind of chills you out or hypes you up, depending on how you kind of approach these situations. I prefer to kind of, get hyped before the event, so I like to listen to some rock music, rap, whatever, and try to get into that right mental mindset of just getting super hyped up, getting very high, and then kind of like gradually kind of bringing it down, as you get closer to the event and before the rounds actually start and you get to the players' meetings and things like that. Additionally, things that you probably should do before, but I guess you can do the day of too if you leave with like enough time, is to make sure that you have snacks and things like that for the day. I don't care if it's a 4 or 5 round tournament. I don't care if it's 9 rounds plus a top 8, 2-day tournament, what have you. Bring snacks. I like to bring like peanut butter crackers. There's like these PB&J sandwiches I actually got for the Columbus event, but they weren't, like Uncrustables or anything like that. They're kind of weird, honestly, and I haven't found them since because they were really tasty, and I'd probably destroy like 4 or 5 boxes of them. But yeah, the idea is still the same. Like this, like if you're hungry, you kind of just do things out of like desperation to like finish the situation as fast as possible when it's not ideal. So definitely just making sure that you kind of, if you're going to like heavily caffeinate, I think you have to try to like maintain that definitely for those longer days as much as possible. I don't recommend that. I usually like doing a little bit of like coffee or something like that before playing, and then if it gets to like the end, towards like the end of the day, you have like 1 or 2 rounds left, maybe you have the top 8 left, then I'll drink like a Red Bull or something like that, just with like a little bit of caffeine to kind of just, mentally kind of like wake you up and then get into the games that you're actually going to play. Because obviously at that point if you're playing in like the last round of the tournament, you're more than likely playing for like a win and in, or maybe playing for seeding, what have you. And then of course like the top 8, you're trying to go for the win. So definitely trying to keep yourself mentally sharp that way, keep your belly full and keep your mind sharp, doing whatever you have to do to kind of de-stress yourself, take yourself out of like the situation that's going on. When you play the match and you finish up, win or lose, don't even think about it afterwards. If you remember a cool play, like tell your friends if you went with friends, what have you. If not, then just kind of, grab your stuff, try to find like an area where you can just kind of sit back, take a deep breath, and just mentally kind of lock in. Like not even really thinking about Magic, but just kind of getting to a place where like you can kind of gather your thoughts, you can take a deep breath, and calm down, and after that, then we can kind of learn what happened. Of course, not always possible because sometimes you go to time on round and then you end up being the last match and things like that aren't able to happen. But it's crucial to even find time in those where you have like maybe a minute or 2 before pairings and stuff go up, that you just kind of like take that deep breath, you gather yourself, again, throw on like a quick song or something like that to just kind of calm the nerves and just lock in and get ready for the next game, because it's super important, obviously, if you are aspiring to win a tournament, make top 8, or even just have like a winning record. Again, like that mental note of the game is so crucial. I mean, obviously we're not out there, doing like catching footballs one-handed, or, having to worry about break a tackle, or, missing a dunk, layup, what have you, like other sports and stuff. There's a ton in the mental game, and making sure that you kind of keep your spirits high. You don't get down on yourself for making misplays and stuff. If you're able to recognize that like you made a mistake, and then you're able to kind of go back and just say, okay, like this is what I did wrong, not get down on yourself, don't let it happen again, those kinds of things. It can definitely go a long way of just keeping your mental sanity through a longer tournament and such. So I know we've talked a lot about kind of the mindset that you want to put yourself in. You want to put yourself in mentally the best place to perform your best. If you're kind of down on yourself, and you end up making like small mistakes and you end up beating yourself up more, you beat yourself up for losing a game or even a match, it's not the end of the world. There's plenty of people that have won tournaments losing matches, and I think it probably happens way more often than, someone actually just goes undefeated and wins the whole event without ever really losing a match. So the thing that I like to do and I like to think about is, while I don't necessarily believe in like the any like holistic things that kind of come with like meditating, I do think it's like a very good way of just kind of like grounding yourself and putting yourself kind of in, a calm state beforehand to just kind of work things out and just kind of go in with like a clear mind, and then on top of that too, a thing that I like to do mentally that kind of helps you to not get so down on yourself if you make mistakes, but, feel pretty good about yourself as well. I think it kind of it's going to sound awful. Like, it does not sound like humble or anything like that at all. But I kind of like to go in with the mindset when I go to a tournament that I'm going to play like the best player in the room. Now, notice I didn't say I'm going in thinking I'm the best player in the room. I'm going to play like the best player in the room. And I think there's two differences to that. If you go in thinking that you're the best player in the room, you're going to play against somebody maybe round one that you're like, okay, yeah, like I think that I'm better than this person. And then you're going to play round two, and then you end up losing, and you're like, oh, like it's just, whatever. You kind of like put the blame everywhere else, like but yourself, when at times you should be held accountable. If you go into the mindset that you're going to play like the best player in the room, at least for me, it kind of like puts me in this place where I'm going to not just rush decisions. I'm going to take my time. I'm going to, map everything out the best that I can with the information that I know. And then, kind of leave it up to like, okay, well, I got punished by like the 5 or 10% of plays that my opponent could have had, trying to go for like the 90% like success. And at that point, like it's obviously not on you as like a player, it's more or less like on just kind of like the luck of the game, which is a thing to remember too, is that there is some kind of luck required to, making a run at winning a tournament. You can control a lot of the things that happen in a game of Magic, but you can't control, you destroy your combo opponent's hand and they top deck the 2 pieces of the combo that they need after you just Thoughtseize them twice and duress them. Like that's just how sometimes the game plays out. Your opponent has like 2 or 3 copies of each of the combo card that they need and like their top 15 cards. And sometimes that just happens. That's Magic, So the importance of this is understanding that like the prep that you do beforehand and like kind of like the mental place you put yourself in, the little bit of prep and just kind of the overall experience and, your way of feeling in all of this is all the things that you can control. It's all the things that you're going to want to control, because when things kind of break down, if you don't have really any kind of practices or anything like that to fall back on, you're more prone to making mistakes, which means that you're more prone to losing games, which equals losing matches, which means getting knocked out of the tournament a lot sooner than you want to be knocked out of it. So if you can kind of remember, some of these pre-tournament tips and some of the, day of stuff, make sure that you aren't hungry, make sure that you're mentally in a good place and you kind of look at yourself positively in a way, mentally and physically, that you are going to perform better, or at least feel like you're playing better, even if like the luck part of it that you can't control doesn't necessarily break your way. So that's going to be the day of tournament stuff. Let's go ahead and actually look at the post-tournament day that you should be kind of looking forward to kind of help your game going into the next tournament or big event that you plan on attending. So we're at post-tournament. Win, lose, what have you, if you got first place, if you ended up getting last place, these are some things that you can do to hopefully maybe lessen the blow a little bit, maybe come away with learning something from the event that you just played in, regardless of the result. So something I like to do post-tournament, and I don't necessarily recommend this to anybody, but it's just something that like I do, and I think there's a healthier way of going about it. I kind of like to mentally kind of review the games and stuff that I played in total and kind of like look back on like key situations and figure out like, okay, like what could I have done in this situation, instead of what I ended up doing, and then try to come to the conclusion like, okay, well, I made the right play, just my opponent had the right punish, or no, I made the wrong play because I misread something and, like I'm a better player for it in the future. Now, the reason why I say I don't like doing this is because if you're like me, I'm very hard on myself, and it's just easier for me to, in the moment, like, okay, I remember, a lot of the key points from most, if not all the matches that I played, and I want to kind of look at them while they're fresh in my mind. However, if you are that kind of person that kind of takes it to the extreme and you really beat yourself up over it and it kind of like ruins your day and things like that, I definitely suggest taking like a day or two to kind of cool off from it, especially if the tournament did not go the way that you wanted it to, and to kind of just, take that time, the car ride home that night, get some sleep, maybe that morning, just kind of like relax, what have you, and then just kind of come back to it and approach it, within a few days of it happening, just so you have still kind of those situations like fresh in your mind. You can mentally play them out. And then on top of that too, you can, adequately learn from them. If you kind of look back on it and you're like, oh yeah, like I did this instead of that. And like, cause my opponent had this, or did they have that? And like at that point, like it doesn't help you necessarily directly with that situation. But in other ways, you can kind of spin it to where like, okay, like if my opponent does have this, like, what do I do? And kind of like, what were some of the signs that led me to like where I could have thought, okay, maybe they do have like this 10%, like, can I afford to play around, so on. So there's definitely some mental game that needs to take place, after the tournament, whether it's, the car ride home, whether it's, as the event is kind of going on, or, even farther where you kind of go a day or two after the event and kind of look back and review on it that way. Definitely some things that you can kind of take where maybe there's a card that you didn't necessarily like that underperformed. You never really wanted to see it, and then you saw it and you were just like disgusted by it. Again, like making those decisions like a day or two after the tournament, and then kind of like testing and doing your own kind of like research and stuff like that, and like your own kind of feelings will make you feel better about playing the deck. And it kind of like loops into the cycle of, this pre-prep where it'll kind of go into that preparation before the tournament, where you're kind of like evaluating what cards and how you want to play the deck that you're playing, whether you kind of like make the switch. Personally, for me, I don't like switching decks unless they feel absolutely awful. Where, if you're having success in like playtesting and then like you go to a tournament and then, like you just have like a bad tournament, it's not worth it to just completely throw the deck away all the time that you've put into learning it, what have you, especially if you're having success elsewhere. So definitely keep that in mind, that in a lot of these Eternal formats, like the percentage points that you gain from, playing the best deck versus like playing maybe like a low tier 1 to tier 2 deck and all the experience you have. I think that the percentage that you go up, potentially go up playing the best deck is not worth it enough unless the deck is like Hogak or Eldrazi levels of broken, if you play the modern format. Like, that's the only time that I think I've ever eschewed, I think that's the right word, the only time that I've ever put knowledge and stuff on the wayside to play just the best deck, because I thought it was overwhelmingly the best deck in the format. So, and you should kind of take that, advice, that note as well. If you're just comfortable playing a deck and you've been performing very well with it, you're pretty good against like the top decks of the format, then I think it's just totally worth playing. And not worth it, if you have a bad tournament with it, just absolutely scrapping it in the kind of post tournament. So yeah, that's my kind of tips, tricks, before, during, and after the tournament. I think all this stuff, there is probably other things out there that you can do. Like, in no way is this going to exactly fit every individual person, but this is just some stuff that I like to do, and things that I think in general on like a broad scale are things that anybody can do with, at least the tiniest bit of effort to ensure that they can perform their very best, on, the tournaments that they have. Of course, like I don't get to play in a lot of tournaments. I'm looking forward to this team tournament coming up, and I felt like this video would be very helpful to people that were, maybe didn't know where to start, or like wanted to get better, because that's kind of like the purpose of my channel, is kind of help people become better players. And I think the prep and everything is so important. And of course, you can kind of branch off into a bunch of different things to what each individual thing actually means. But at the end of the day, I think you need a little bit of everything here to kind of ensure your success, on the tournament Saturday or Sunday, whenever it's going on, whether it's a 20, 30 person RCQ or it's, the big, 2-day Star City games, NRG events and stuff. So that's going to be me in this video. Hope you all enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like on the video. Subscribe if you're not already subscribed, and ring the notification bell so you know when future videos get posted. Join the Discord server. There's a link in the description down below. That's going to do it for me. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all in the next one.